Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something critical. What happens when the map, the actual blueprint for a student's learning, is missing?
Uh-huh.
We're talking about psychoeducational reports, and specifically a systemic issue where they just aren't there when they're needed most.
Yeah, it's a huge gap.
So we looked into the experience of an RSP teacher, a case manager, who gets files for new students, right? And they see IEPs, they see lists.
List of accommodations, sure. Extended time, preferential seating, things like that.
Exactly. But the teacher's looking for the why. Why this accommodation? What's the actual cognitive reason? And often that data just isn't included.
It's like getting a prescription with no diagnosis.
Yeah.
You know what to do, give more time, but you don't know why they need it, or if that's even the right thing. Does it really match the underlying issue? Probably not always.
Our source used phrases like scaffolding blindly
Hmm.
or a guessing game dressed up in formal paperwork. You're supposed to be providing targeted support, illegally documented support.
But you're essentially flying blind. No instruments.
And it's important to say up front, this isn't about teachers not caring.
Oh, absolutely not. It's systemic.
The root cause our source pointed to: a shortage of school psychologists, seriously lacking capacity.
Yeah, you might have one psychologist trying to cover, say, 3 or 4 different campuses.
Right.
They're stretched incredibly thin.
Which forces them into
Yeah.
triage mode.
Exactly. So the legally mandated stuff gets done, the initial evaluations, the 3-year re-evals.
But anything beyond that, like an updated assessment for a student whose needs have changed or digging deeper into a confusing profile.
That often falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
So the student arrives, maybe in middle school or high school, and there's just no current map of how their brain actually processes information.
Okay, so let's talk about what that map should contain. The power of knowing the why.
Right. A good psychoed evaluation moves beyond just what you see, the frustration, the unfinished work.
Uh-huh.
It identifies the hidden mechanics, the neurological reasons why learning is difficult for that specific student.
Yeah.
It pinpoints the bottleneck.
So, if the system isn't providing this, let's unpack what we're missing. Our source highlighted a few key assessments they wish they saw more often. Let's start with one. The WISC-V picture span. Why that test? What's it measuring?
Okay, picture span is really interesting. It taps into visual sequential memory.
Visual sequential memory, like seeing things in order.
Exactly. Think about reading a word. You have to see the letters, those little images, graphemes, and hold them in the right sequence in your mind long enough to decode the word.
Yeah, okay.
If your visual sequential memory is weak, you might know all the letter sounds perfectly, but you mentally scramble the order before you can sound it out. The sequence gets lost.
So it's not about phonics knowledge itself. It's about holding the visual pattern.
Precisely. And if you don't identify that specific cognitive bottleneck, you might just think, oh, this student needs more phonics practice, or maybe they're just not paying attention. But the intervention misses the mark because the core issue, that sequential processing difficulty, isn't being addressed. It's like, I don't know, trying to fix a leaky pipe by painting the wall.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's the NEPSY-II. Our source mentioned this gives more nuance. How does it help with, say, overlapping issues, like a student who struggles with reading and seems easily distracted?
Well, the NEPSY-II is great because it helps build a pattern recognition profile. It breaks down these complex presentations.
Okay.
So with that student distractible, poor reading the NPSY helps figure out, is the primary issue sustained attention? Is it maybe auditory working memory, they can't hold instructions in their head? Or is it something more like visual spatial processing?
How does it distinguish that?
Let me give an example. Imagine you put notes on the board. A student struggling with encoding, just getting the visual info in, might only catch the first bit and then drift off.
Okay.
But a student struggling with retrieval might seem to get it all down, but later, when they need to recall that information, they can't find it efficiently in their mental files.
Wow, okay. They look similar on the surface.
Very similar in a busy classroom.
Yeah.
But they need totally different support strategies. The NEPSY helps tease that apart.
That distinction is huge, and you really need the formal tool for that. The third one mentioned was a Beery VMI. Sounds technical, visual motor integration. What's the practical impact?
The Beery VMI is basically the blueprint for the physical side of learning on paper. It looks at how well a student can translate what they see into coordinated hand movements.
Like writing or cutting.
Exactly. Writing, drawing, copying shapes, using scissors. This test often holds the answer to why a student's handwriting is incredibly messy, or why they get exhausted and frustrated after writing just a couple of sentences.
So it's not just sloppy work.
No, it could be a real neurological challenge. If a student avoids writing tasks without the Beery data, you might think it's defiance or lack of effort. But if the test shows a significant visual motor integration deficit, you realize their avoidance is a response to genuine difficulty and overload. It completely reframes the problem away from behavior.
Okay, so these tools are clearly powerful. But we have to touch on what our source called the Pearson problem.
Ah, yes. The big testing companies.
These vital assessments, WISC, NEPSY, Beery, they're often owned by major corporations. Knowledge behind paywalls requiring specific licenses.
It's a definite contradiction, isn't it? The source felt this tension. These tools can feel quite clinical, maybe even a bit reductive to a child's experience.
Like a stripping down rather than an opening up was the phrase used.
Yeah, and yet they're gatekept, tied up in the business of testing.
But the argument was you have to use them anyway.
You do, because the IEP, that Individualized Education Program, it's described as this huge bureaucratic privilege. It's a legal safety net.
Right.
And to secure the resources needed, maybe it's specialized instruction, maybe assistive tech, maybe just more time you have to speak the language the system understands.
Which is the language of data, scores, formal assessment.
Precisely. You use the tools, even with their flaws, to gain leverage for the student within that system.
And there's research backing up the need for this specificity, isn't there? Like the Kibby study from 2015.
Yes, that was a key point. Kibby and colleagues found something really specific about visual, sequential, short-term memory.
What was it?
They found that impairment was present only in the children with reading disorders, not in the children who only had ADHD.
Wow, so it's not just a general attention thing causing the reading issue in those kids. It's a distinct cognitive profile.
Exactly, which shows why generic interventions fail. If a student has that specific visual sequential deficit, just sticking them in another phonics group
Isn't going to work.
It won't. And worse, it can increase feelings of shame and failure because you're asking them to try harder at something using a pathway that's fundamentally inefficient for them. You haven't addressed the root cause.
And this need for precise data is even more critical for GLP students, right? Gifted and learning disabled.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Because their giftedness, maybe high vocabulary, sharp reasoning skills, can totally mask underlying difficulties.
Like a smokescreen.
Exactly. They might perform really well verbally, so people overlook struggles with, say, processing speed or written output or that sequential reading piece. They look fine.
So their intelligence actually works against them getting help sometimes.
It can, yeah. The psychoed helps control for that high ability to reveal the specific learning challenge underneath. Without that formal data, that bright but struggling kid is often the one who gets missed entirely.
Okay, so that's the ideal. But let's pivot back to the classroom reality our source described. The files arrive, the formal reports are missing or outdated. All the teacher gets is maybe a note saying, difficult, oppositional, disengaged.
Yeah, the deficit language with no map.
So how do you find the patterns then? How do you figure out the why without the official data?
This is where the educator has to become like a detective. You shift from just looking for the formal report to actively searching for clues in interaction. Our source talked about moving past the paperwork and starting with something human, often a game.
A game, like instead of formal assessment.
Not instead of, but as a way to gather meaningful information when the formal stuff is missing. Things like chess or building with Lego, even just asking the student to explain how to make their favorite snack.
How is that diagnostic?
It's described as deeply diagnostic in a human way. It's not standardized, obviously, but it reveals cognition in action. You see how they think, plan, sequence, handle frustration.
Okay, let's break that down. Chess, 10 minutes. What are you looking for?
Oh, so much. You're watching their executive functions live. How do they scan the board? Globally, seeing the whole picture, or just locally, focused only on their next move.
Planning skills.
Yeah. Do they think one step ahead, 2 steps, no steps? That shows working memory, sequencing, spatial reasoning, and crucially, how do they react to losing a piece or the game? Is it seen as total failure or just information for next time? That tells you about their mental flexibility.
Fascinating. And with Lego, what comes out there?
Similar things, but maybe more focused on construction and sequence. Do they free build or do they need instructions? If they use instructions, can they follow the visual steps in order?
Do they talk while they build?
Yeah. Do they narrate their process? That shows verbal mediation, sequencing their thoughts. And the big one is frustration tolerance.
Ah, what happens when it doesn't work?
Exactly. A piece doesn't fit or the tower falls. What do? Try to force it. Find a different piece. Give up entirely. That moment reveals a lot about how they approach challenges and manage setbacks.
So these aren't clinical diagnoses?
Not at all, but they're ways of generating hypotheses. They provide clues that often link back to those cognitive areas we talked about: executive function, visual processing, sequencing.
And it builds trust too, presumably.
Huge trust. And it helps the educator start seeing patterns, developing a working theory about the student's learning style, even without the official map.
Okay, which really brings us back full circle to the core message here. The system is often the point of failure, not the student or the teacher. We fail kids not from lack of caring,
But from lack of resources. That shortage of school psychologists is a structural, often budget-driven problem.
and the cost of not knowing, of not having that psychoed report.
It's immense. It's paid in student frustration, anxiety, years of inappropriate interventions, missed potential. The human cost far outweighs the cost of an assessment.
So the call to action seems pretty straightforward, though maybe hard to implement.
Fund the psychologists. Make comprehensive psychoed standard for incoming IEP students. Train educators more deeply in cognitive science, not just compliance paperwork.
Build the infrastructure for genuine understanding.
Right, because, as the source pointed out, sometimes the most profound insight doesn't come from the test score. It comes from that moment in play,
Yeah.
when the student's guard is down and they feel seen, not judged, but understood in how they approach things.
That sense of being seen not for what you can't do, but for how you do what you do.
Exactly. That connection can transform how an IEP is used from just a list of accommodations to a real tool for support built on understanding.
So ideally, every IEP journey starts with that data map. But sometimes maybe it has to start with a game, with connection.
If you're lucky and observant, yes.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about. How do we move our systems, our schools, our practices from just sort of handling students with generic accommodations to truly holding them with a deep understanding of how their unique minds work?
That's the shift we need, something to really mull over.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.